Today I want to talk about how funding in FOSS, or free and open source software, is a big issue. There's a few projects that I'm going to hit on today, including XZ, Serpent OS, and Alpine Linux, because all these projects are currently struggling, and it highlights some of the financial and structural challenges that open source projects like these face, even critical software like XZ utilities in the open source world. We're first starting out with the XZ utilities, a collection of free and open source command line tools and libraries for lossless data compression. This is an amazing set of tools, and this post here is a plea to the users of XZ to continue to help fund the tools, because the main maintainer is having issue trying to keep the development going, as there's only one main maintainer. The XZ Utilities project was significantly impacted after the recent incident known as the XZ backdoor. A lot of us will remember this one, but just as a brief refresher, this was a malicious act operating under an alias Giatan, who infiltrated the XZ Utilities over about 3 years. Gaining co-maintainer status allowed him to introduce a backdoor in its specific versions of the XZ Utilities and could manipulate the open source server daemon, also known as SSHD, to potentially gain unauthorized remote access to any affected system. This was a big deal and has caused repercussions, but now we're struggling with XZ for another reason. The maintainer of XZ is still in need of true support after they were abused by someone who tried to viciously introduce a backdoor to potentially millions of servers and computers. They opened a Libra Pay account here, and we're going to go to that, and I'll post a link in the description below. They only receive €5 a week for now. You know XZ is crucial for a lot of critical systems. Please tip them generously and boost this message. So we are boosting the message, but both the incident and this post highlight the importance of FOSS and how maintainers struggle to receive financial support in order to keep their projects going. These contributors typically share their work freely, allowing anyone to use it, modify, and distribute their software. And yet they get slammed by an infiltration like the one that Giatan did. But this is a widespread issue. Larzu, the XZ Utilities maintainer, currently only receives $26.70 per week from 15 patrons. They're a free software hobbyist from Finland, maintain a few small, what they call small, compression projects. These are massive projects that service millions of computers, especially Linux devices. The XZ Utilities, XZ for Java, and XZ Embedded. Due to Finnish Money Collection Act, I do not accept donations from Finns or people living in Finland, which is kind of funny in my opinion. But regardless, I'll post a link in the description below so you can check this page out if you feel like it. Free and open source software projects often face these significant funding challenges, often having to be funded by companies as well as users, because they spend a lot of free time supplying the software to us. But as we'll tell in some of these other stories, there's also infrastructure costs that really stifle their development process, because XZ is not the only FOSS project suffering right now. Let's get into some others, but before we do, I'd like to shout out Failword on Discord for helping with this research on the FOSS financial issues and challenges. Now I'd like to talk about Serpent OS as it enters an alpha on December 23rd, 2024, about a month ago. Following a successful pre-alpha phase, we're excited to announce that Serpent OS has now entered the alpha stage of development. The milestone marks a significant step forward in the project's journey. While the usual disclaimers apply, a certain level of project fluidity is to be expected. We invite you to explore the latest alpha release and experience the cutting-edge features and improvements we've introduced. Well, this is all fun and great, but they're also struggling with funding. As the main account posted, there's going to be a delay in development as the too long don't read, broke, gotta pay the bills, had of course hoped to be further ahead by this point, but such is life. Not only life events are getting in the way, as Ike Doherty had said there, they go into more depth of what's actually happening, but it boils down to not having the proper funds in order to continue the project, at least in the fashion that they have, and giving as much time as they have. Serpent OS had made notable progress, and of course it faces hurdles continuing to secure funding and financial backing, including from users and companies, as it doesn't mind receiving either sort of backing, but it's proven hard to do. So another project affected by it, Serpent OS. For those of you who are using the project and enjoy it, think about how you can help as well. And you can also help me by smashing that like button and subscribing below if you like videos like this. YouTube gets finicky and you wouldn't want to miss another video like this. According to the operating system engineer, Ike, a big contributor to Solus, as well as some Clear Linux, clears things up for us. Per the hashtag Serpent OS social media posts I've been having to slow development down. Folks don't like to talk about money, but plain and simple, I haven't got the funds right now. Truthfully, zero funds. I hadn't planned to be out of employment, but lack of income protection and some busted up nerves made that a reality. So I've been giving my all to my project these past few months. So if anyone is looking to support a game-changing Linux distribution with genuine atomic updates that don't mandate reboots to apply or further the oxidation of Linux, please do get in touch. The mention of this is because there is a high focus of using Rust in order to make contributions to Linux here. For those of you that aren't aware, there are some Rust-based components developed in Serpent OS, and they continue to build more. You can check out one of their tools. It's called disks-rs. Anyways, we don't want to get into programs today, but we'll continue reading. So it would be an absolute shame to waste all we've done when we're so close to realizing our goals. Again, they're in that pre-alpha stage. Lately, we've even begun working on replacing the system level components with Rust written disk management and topping it off with a brand new GUI installer implemented using Slint. It's the only distro like it, also shipping with utilities, core utilities, sudo rust, ntpd rust by default, and with more planned. If not, I guess I'll hit the classifieds. This is a plea and a call for support, especially with recent developments in the FOSS community. This message really underscores the critical funding challenges that Serpent OS and other open source projects face. Despite their innovation and advancements, they're still reliant on community and sponsor support, and it's clearly evident here as all their goals might be at risk if they don't get funding. It's hard to witness the free and open source software projects struggling due to these funding challenges, especially when they're significant contributions. I mean, XZ is just such a massive project, and it's been plagued with issues over the last few months, including the funding and the hack. Same thing with Serpent OS. They're really trying out a whole new avenue in the Linux distro space with the implementation of Rust and other bold ideas, but again, being roadblocked by the funding aspect. I mean, one of the struggles is the perception of free software. Many users and organizations expect FOSS just to be free of charge. They don't take into consideration stuff like infrastructure costs, just the sheer bandwidth on some of the projects in order to download them, and the servers to maintain them just cost a lot of money, not including the time that it takes to actually program and maintain these projects, which can lead to burnout or project abandonment. We've seen this in the previous years with big projects just seemingly giving up. For example, the Rust for Linux main maintainers stepped down last year. Resource constraints are also a big one, including just keeping up with security measures and dependency management. That's all challenging in itself. And then on top of it, you expect these open source developers to be their own salespeople, trying to monetize their open source projects efficiently. These challenges all lead to a big threat for FOSS and the individual projects that people are working on. Anyways, just trying to get some awareness out. Let's talk about the director of the Linux Foundation IT, currently in charge of kernel.org infrastructure, who is now considering dropping commercially backed distros from mirrors.kernel.org as a part of the migration away from Equinix Metal, Fedora, Ubuntu, and OpenSUSE. It would drop us from 35 terabytes to 23 terabytes and make significant impact on our bandwidth requirements. The conversation here from Konstantin involves the Linux Foundation infrastructure and potentially changing the hosting of Linux distributions. The proposal is to drop commercially backed distributions, all to save some bandwidth, and drop the Equinix Metal, which is a bare metal server provider. And a lot of community members are suggesting exploring other hosting providers such as OVH and looking at other infrastructure providers. But this is just another example of how we're cutting back in the Linux open source community. We don't have final details of where we're going yet, but it's certainly odd to still be donating thousands of dollars monthly to distros that are backed by companies that bring in billions in revenue, which is another mention. Because this statement highlights the issue of nonprofit organizations like the Linux kernel organization having to use substantial funds to support and distribute infrastructure when those same Linux distributions that they're supporting are financially backed by large corporations, underscoring the importance of large corporate entities that don't necessarily always feed back into the FOSS ecosystem and support these smaller projects, but even the mirrors on kernel.org are stepping back and tightening their belts a little bit in order to save some money. We've already covered some of the overall community sentiment, at least on the forums and threads that I've been reading. There's really just frustration in general over the FOSS funding issues. Many people are suggesting that projects are going to continue to struggle while big tech companies profit massively from the open source software. We all know this is a big issue, but also it is a harsh reality because a lot of these projects just don't exist in a highly profitable space, requiring backing by community members instead of corporations because the corporations, quite frankly, don't see operating system development and other open source projects as fruitful for themselves, so there's no reason to fund them. And then we get the argument that marketing and exposure really matter for these projects, pointing out that good FOSS projects won't succeed if they don't reach enough people. But is this really the job of the maintainers and people who are giving us this software for free? That's a hard one to swallow, but hopefully we see more innovation in this space and how we can better support these free and open source projects in the future. But until then, we're going to talk about Alpine Linux. We just got done mentioning Equinix Metals. This article reads, seeking support after Equinix Metals sunsets. We are deeply grateful to Equinix Metal, formerly Packet.net, for their longstanding support, which has been essential to Alpine Linux's ecosystem. However, with Equinix sunsetting their bare metal hosting service, this critical support will end soon. Their contributors have been invaluable, and we thank them for helping keep Alpine Linux reliable and efficient. The change poses significant challenge as it impacts key infrastructure hosted with Equinix. To ensure continuity, we must now find alternative hosting solutions. Below, we outline the effective infrastructure and how the community can help us navigate this transition. So you might be asking, what is affected here when it comes to Alpine? Well, T1 mirroring infrastructure requires newer servers with 5 terabytes of storage and high bandwidth. So those are affected because they're currently hosted with Equinix. Also, the CI runners need servers with 50 gigs of storage and 16 gigs of RAM for packaging and building. And finally, a development box, a single server that is dedicated to development environment for contributors and maintainers. So how can the community help? Well, they're looking for co-location space, bare metal servers, and virtual machines. You can also support Alpine Linux financially, but this is another example of how many open source projects, including Alpine Linux, heavily rely on corporate sponsorships rather than having a dedicated revenue stream. They're now asking the community to step in and help, or at least come up with creative ways and maybe even financial backing to help them cover the new costs. These are all the hidden costs of free and open source software. It's free to use, but it's not free to maintain. Behind every one of these projects we cover today, there's storage, servers, pipelines, and developers who all require resources in order to keep things running. The biggest resource being money. And the lack of sustainable funding models is really hurting FOSS today, as the main things that are driving the funding are corporate contributions, community donations, and government grants. All 3 of them being very hard to get. So I think there's a clear need for better FOSS support models. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. As the sustainability of free and open source projects come into play, there's definitely going to be future financial struggles, and we'll see what other projects are going to deal with this. I wish all these projects the best. Good luck out there. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations, you're a true supporter as well. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe below so you don't miss another video like this. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I'll catch you in another video. Thanks for watching. Linux can be hard to understand, but I take the most commonly used terms, commands, and subjects in Linux, and I break them down into simple to read documents, including Linux terms, flashcards, a checklist, a cheat sheet, and a mind map. And if you're ready to level up your Linux experience and knowledge, go to SavvyNik.com now and get access to these sheets.